evening at 6 p.m. So we will begin. This meeting is being recorded and also live streamed on the Monitor's YouTube channel. Okay, let's begin. Thank you all for joining us for the first CAC meeting of 2023. It's wonderful to see you all here. We do have a pretty jam-packed agenda, which I'm really excited about this evening. So we will ask that everyone please keep to your time frames, but still be willing to contribute to a robust discussion. Thank you all for being here. I do have to send regrets, unfortunately, from Bart Schwartz. He is under the weather this evening and will be unable to join us. We just found out moments ago, but he does send his regards to everyone and apologies, and he will review the video after this meeting. So with no further ado, I'd like to talk through tonight's agenda. First, we will have a presentation from NYCHA on the capital tracker, which we're really excited about because that idea was really born here at the CAC from Council Member Alika Ampry-Samuel at the time, who is now the regional administrator at HUD. After that update, we will get updates from our CAC members from safety and security issues and perspectives as it relates to NYFD, NYPD, and NYCHA's Public Safety and Security Group. If New York City Council Member Avias is able to join us, we will hear her update as well as the HUD update from Regional Administrator Alika Ampry-Samuels. We have several representatives from NYCHA who will also give us updates and other updates from our members who have joined us this evening. And then I will close us out and announce our upcoming meeting schedule. So with that, I will turn please to NYCHA to give us an intro and update, please.
So I can start. Thank you so much, Asha. My name is Sean Babani. Some of you may remember me. We presented about the capital tracker last early March, I want to say, before we launched the first version in April. And we had come to you at the time with a kind of early testing version and gotten your feedback and tried to incorporate what we could. We're now kind of 9 months on and starting to think about how to enhance the version that's been online since last April. And we're coming to you a little bit earlier with some kind of mock-ups that we've created after talking to a lot of internal kind of staff, as well as a resident roundtable and certain users to incorporate their ideas. And we thought it'd be great to also run it past you before we kind of start to really work on it, in terms of the software and the technical side of it, right? So Abigail Fradkin, who works in my office, and I should have introduced, I oversee capital and real estate work at NYCHA, has been kind of looking at this and developed some mock-ups with some of our internal IT folks and design folks, and just wants to take you through those and get your feedback, if that sounds okay.
Great. Thank you all so much for having us. We're excited to talk this through with you and walk through what's really a very initial version of what an updated capital projects tracker could look like. Is this large enough for everyone? Can you see it okay? Great. Okay. So basically this mock-up responds to a lot of feedback we've gotten from different stakeholders, both internal and external to NYCHA, so residents, various of the resident groups, and then also staff that work with residents, as well as elected officials and their staff around what additions to our current capital projects tracker people would like to see in terms of information, in terms of functionality, and other things. And one of the things that we are really looking to provide here that's not at all integrated into the current capital projects tracker is the best way to give the public a view of how our capital needs and our capital projects information relate to each other. So this mock-up will give you a sense of kind of how we're thinking about pulling those different pieces of information together, and then kind of what it might look like to walk through the site and find different pieces of information that someone might be looking for. So I'm just going to run through the mock-up to give you a sense of how we're thinking about it, and then we'll pause for your feedback and initial reactions and thoughts on kind of other things that you might want to see in a new version of the capital tracker. So this is, what you would see when you came to our tracker page. It looks pretty similar to the current capital projects tracker, where you can search by borough, council district, funding source, and project status. The thing we would be adding here is a development view. So you could search by development if you were looking for all the information about a particular development. And then we'd have some kind of pop-up or information on a particular development if you searched, if you clicked on a development on the map, and you could find out kind of the top level information about capital needs, the total amount of funding being put into projects at that particular development, as well as a list of projects that are currently active. And we'll talk more about kind of the additional project information that will be included here as well. So if you click through from here to a particular development page, it would look something like this. And right now on the tracker, we don't have development pages at all. We just have pages for particular projects. But we've gotten a lot of feedback around the importance of being able to kind of look at all of the different projects that are happening at a development in one place. And also, it's a good way of showing the information that we're adding to this around capital needs. So we give, you have basic information on the development, a picture, a map, and then we give a snapshot of what is the 5-year capital need at that development, what's the 20-year capital need, and the total amount of funding being put into that work at that development. And then you could also look at the breakdown of those needs. So this information, as probably some of you are aware, we're in the process of completing our 2022 physical needs assessment, which will update our cost estimates for the capital needs at development, all of NYCHA's developments. And so what we would be doing here is sharing that updated information on the new tracker. And we could break it out in a bunch of different ways, but we've thought about the major areas of work that are included in the capital track, in the physical needs assessment, and that people might want to, understand in terms of what the need for roofs is at a particular development, which areas of need are the largest at a particular development, and kind of what the breakdown of the overall need is in general. And then we'd also organize information, the list of projects according to those areas of work. So you could see, okay, at this development, and I should say that all of the numbers here are just dummy data. They're not the real numbers, but we obviously would have the real numbers for each development in when we were ready to launch the tracker. So this gives you a sense of like, here the roofs are the biggest area of need, and you could see like, is there a roofing project happening at that development? Yes, there is. And then you could click through from here to find out more about that particular project. And I'll show you kind of what you would see when you click through in a second. We've also gotten a bunch of feedback around different ways of understanding what the capital needs are, how to visualize that in ways that were useful to people. And so we've put together a couple of different kind of views of what that might look like in terms of, over time, you could see progress towards the total capital need. You could see the total 5-year capital need broken out by areas of work in a graphical form. And we've also heard from people that it would be helpful to see how the need at a particular development compares to the average need within NYCHA. And so we'd have some view of that potentially as well. And then we've been also thinking about kind of additional information that people might find useful to include here, and include, we've been thinking about including information for vendors so they could link to procurement opportunities, and also information for residents who are interested in finding out about Section 3 job opportunities. We'd link through to Reese, where they'd be connected to someone who could help them navigate that process. And then if you click through from here, you wanted to learn more about a particular development, then you'd click through to a project page. And the project pages are pretty similar to the pages that we have on our current capital tracker, but we've made some additions based on feedback we've gotten from people about what additional information would be helpful to see about a project. So I'll walk through the additions we're thinking of and that are reflected in this mock-up, and would also love to hear additional thoughts you all have on what information would be useful. So we would be including a more detailed project scope. Right now, the project scopes are pretty general, and so we're working on updating the project scope information. So what we'd be sharing on the tracker would be more detailed. We'd also have a more detailed project update, which is not reflected in this mock-up here, but we'd have more information on what's happening with the project than we currently have on the capital tracker. And then this is, similar to what we have on the current tracker. We'd have a view of where the project is in the different project stages. So this one is in procurement, and you'd also be able to see the date, the dates that were planned and the actual dates, and if there's any variance there. And again, this is just dummy data, but this would be updated. Every 2 weeks, and so you'd have a good snapshot of where the project was in the process and where it was in relation to the planned dates. We also are including more information on project vendors, what the vendor names are, which we don't have, and we've heard from a bunch of people would be useful to know. And we'd also be including more information on not only who the project manager is at NYCHA, but also who the field supervisor or construction manager is. So the person who would be on site on a daily basis and that people would be seeing around the development. The last thing here is that we also want to give people a view of where in a development a project is happening. So we would have some kind of map with the building numbers, and a description of, in this case, the project is happening across the development, but in many cases, it would be at one building or a couple of buildings. And so that would be included here so people were aware of where the project was actually happening and wouldn't have to go somewhere else to find that information. So I'm going to stop there and see what kind of questions or reactions you all have to the mock-up, and just want to reiterate what Sean said, which is this is a really, an early version of what this could look like that gives you a sense of the kind of information we're looking to include in the next version of this. And it wouldn't look exactly like this graphically, but thought it would be helpful for you all to see what it could look like.
Thank you so much. It's really encouraging to see how much progress has been made, and all of the additional information is going to be included. I'm curious, where are you pulling the data from? And has there been confirmation that that data source is going to be up to date and accurate?
Yeah, so all the project information is being pulled from our backend project system, our project management system, eBuilder, and we're making a number of changes to that system to ensure that information is more detailed and is updated on a more regular basis. So we're working on that right now, and that would feed some of the more detailed updates that I just described, and that does require changes to that system. And then the capital needs information, as I mentioned, would be coming from our physical needs assessment, which we're in the process of completing now. And that information would be then included in the tracker when we launch the next version of it.
I would just add, that's a great question, Asha. So currently, some people may be aware, we have over 700 active projects. And so none of the information on the site can be manually inputted, because as you're kind of alluding to, it would very quickly get kind of, errors or out of date. So we manage all of our project work, everything from our budgets and the financing to our documentation to even our vendors. They work in the same system through one project management system that we've implemented, in 2020, and we've been enhancing every year. So everything that's here is coming from there. And when we implemented last year, that was some of the challenge, right? Some information was not in that system, so we couldn't bring it here. Abigail mentioned that, sometimes we don't always have the detail. Actually, we have a lot of information in the system, but one of the challenges we have, like, project update or a project scope, our different architects or staff members may write things in a different way. And we don't want to present that to the website with spelling errors and, unclear language. So what we're working on is how do we standardize all of that? So moving forward, the same information is written in exactly the same way, even in different projects, right? And that's some of the back end work we've been doing over the last 9 months to get ready to do something like this.
Great. And one of the initial concerns was that the moment that, a city official, city council person, for example, might say, okay, I'm giving, $5 million for playgrounds, that moment that they've, released their press release, the, council person's happy and the resident leaders are happy. And then, many months or perhaps years go by before they see, any work getting started. Will this tracker capture the dollars that have been pledged, if you will, at that early stage?
Yeah, so it's not going to track, it won't be able to track dollars from when they're pledged. But I should have mentioned also that we are going to be including planned project information. So once a project is far enough along in the planning process and the funding has actually been allocated, then we will be able to include it on the tracker in a way that we don't currently have planned projects. We only have active and completed projects. And so are looking to do that and give people a forward-looking view of projects that are planned at the developments as well.
If I can help clarify that, again, a great question. Unfortunately, sometimes things are publicly pledged, but we never get that funding. And so, or, funding can take a couple of years to materialize, and people aren't aware when it became available to us versus when it might be discussed publicly. And so therefore, our trigger of when it comes into NYCHA is when it's in our financial systems. It doesn't necessarily mean we got the money, but we know the money's coming through the city budget. We've set it up in our systems, and then it flows into our project management system. And now it kind of exists as a real project for us. And that way we can present it on this website through the system, but also we can at least present some basic information about it that we have together with the funding amount, right? And so that's kind of what our starting point would be.
Is there a way to back in earlier or to see the data?
So I'll show that the challenge is often we don't have that data, right? Something may be said verbally or it's being negotiated in a certain city agreement or state agreement, but nobody has informed us that we have any legal allocation of funding. So for us to represent funding and then have to say later, actually, there never was that funding, sometimes it's very tricky for stakeholders to find us credible. And that's the reason why we're hesitant to present something out till we actually know there's a formal allocation of funding to us to work with, right?
Understand. And then my last question is on the other end, where the project has started, you'll have a vendor in place and residents are feeling like they're really not up to par. Is there a way here or perhaps another source where they can, link to comments about the project or concerns?
Yeah, again, it's a great question. We hope that when there are any challenges at a site because of a project, we can kind of deal with that, very promptly based on the concerns that property managers or TA leaders or other residents have. And so when a project actually moves to construction, for example, there is a biweekly meeting that the TA leader, property managers, as a matter of course, should always be invited to. And there they not only get a sense of what's happening in the project, what might be upcoming, activities and maybe any disruption on the campus, but they also have the opportunity to raise any type of concerns. And I know a lot of folks would say, but we don't always have time to attend those, but we try to create live touch points where people get updates and can raise concerns so we can kind of address them very quickly, rather than necessarily through a process like this where it may come in through the site and then we get a lot of those inquiries. We have to try to figure out how to best respond to them and all that. So longer term, we are definitely thinking about what you're saying, which is how might we collect feedback on the project experience and other aspects. Separate from this effort, we're trying to we have a number of initiatives to say, how do we directly bring resident feedback on projects into the vendor evaluation so that it actually impacts whether we select them again or not next time, right? Because that's the real place we want to bring in that information, is to know that, well, there was too many problems with this vendor, they didn't perform well, we won't use them again, right? And so we're working with our procurement colleagues on how do we collect and utilize that information. And so maybe not through this tracker in the next release, which we hope would be in the next couple months, but in the future, something we'd like to develop, as you're saying.
Thank you for that clarification. And I see that our resident representative from Queens, Manny Martinez, has his hand up. Manny, please proceed.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Ms. Muldrow. Thank you so much, and good evening to everyone here. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have a couple of questions specifically on Section 3, and how this tracker can assist in that identification of where these opportunities are. Each of these projects that are on public housing grounds are Section 3 projects. And given that there's no economic threshold through legacy contracts, meaning under the old 135 and also under the new Part 75, that if a penny of public housing and financial assistance is a part of the project, then the whole project is Section 3. And given that over the last 4 years, or not the last 4 years, but in the 4 years that NYCHA has been recording Section 3 employment, hiring, it's been 2,300 people, a little over 2,300 people, which shows that REIS has not been effective. And the only mention of Section 3 here is through REIS, which has proven to be a bottleneck, where the mass opportunities are not being reached. Mr. Mavani, you was a part of the working group for Section 3, and we have identified that REIS has less than 1% of the employed or those looking for employment in NYCHA's population. And so, handling it to REIS is not a viable strategy. Also, a part of that group, and so I can just be very verbatim, it says here, and this is part of the working group, as of May 27, 2022, there are 75,312 non-disabled working age residents who did not report to NYCHA income from employment. 75,000 residents. When we're looking at the training, there's zero training that is occurring at any of these projects, at any of these construction projects on NYCHA properties. There are the hiring, as we can see, is very minimal, is not being communicated. And when we start looking at the total contract values, for my last check, given the transparency contracts that you provided, right, under the transparency agreement that you did with Scott Stringer, when Scott Stringer was comptroller, we can total that it was roughly $12 billion in total contract value. Of that, and now this is generally speaking, $6 billion was roughly Section 3, that triggers Section 3. And of that $6 billion, $4 billion that are legacy contracts, which mean that they're still bound by Part 135. And what makes that significant is that in Part 135, there's a specific mandate of Section 3 business concern contracting of 10% of the contract value. Thus, if a contract is $10 million, then that contractor must subcontract with a Section 3 business concern $1 million, or with the collection of Section 3 business concerns up to $1 million. And that is not happening because also in that work group, we identified that NYCHA has 0% of Section 3 business concerns being contracted on any of these projects. And so given the large, massive opportunity and the large population that needs connections to this opportunity, I don't understand why we feel that in this opportunity here, especially when you have other widgets on here that are in beta, that we don't believe that it's necessary for Section 9, which the focus is economic mobility and access to home ownership equity. The purpose of whole Section 9, the $1 million lease, is not reflected in these attempts here. Now, lastly, I just want to remind NYCHA that you have the responsibility of affirmatively furthering fair housing. Fair housing, Section 3 is a fair housing issue, given that the lease is what attaches the person to the Section 3 mandates. And fair housing is respectively pertaining to the privileges that are on the lease. This is, you can read that in Part 100, which is the regulations for fair housing. I do not see any efforts to affirmatively further fair housing. I do not see any efforts to improve the quality of life for the residents that public housing, that NYCHA, which is not public housing, NYCHA is the entity that manages public housing, that NYCHA serves. This is sorely disappointing and disconcerting. So I'm just, if I could just ask you, what strategies will you put to implement Section 3 better using this protocol?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Very helpful. And Section 3 is a big priority for us, for all the reasons you've highlighted, and the mandate we have as an agency, and for me and my division as well. And we would like to, one of the great opportunities with something like this is to use it to popularize Section 3 hiring opportunities for NYCHA residents and other Section 3 workers, right? So we'd like to do that eventually. The challenge we have today is unfortunately just a technical challenge, as I mentioned, around how we collect and gather that information. And so it may be helpful to understand that the folks who work in my team and manage capital projects, they do a regular review with every invoice from a contractor around their Section 3 performance. Are they meeting the Section 3 labor hours now that the rule changed sometime back to labor hours? And then they try to push the contractor for compliance with greater Section 3 hiring. And we go through that process on a regular basis for each project, but we don't capture that information in an easily reportable way, right? Because payroll records are PDF documents and all that. So we've kicked off a process in, I believe, November to implement an enhancement to our project management software that would automatically pick up Section 3 information from the payrolls, capture the information from the vendor and from our teams. So exactly as you're saying, we could start to present out in an automated way Section 3 performance metrics, and eventually also Section 3 opportunities. It's going to take us a few months to both implement that software and to bring all our vendors onto it and our internal teams and train them. And then we'd be able to automate some of that here the way that you're alluding to, which would be very valuable for everyone. In the interim, we've pointed to the REIS website because there's a certain amount of job posting, training support, and other resources there. And I understand your point that you and others don't find REIS's performance up to where you'd like it to be. But right now, that's the best resource we have, and directing residents towards that, maybe there will be some increased awareness and the ability to meet residents' needs better over time through that. And that's the only reason right now what Abigail showed. We just have a link to that page, but we are working in the background to improve our data and technology so we're able to automate presenting out that information that you're talking about, right? And we definitely like to get there as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for that really good question. And thank you, Sean, for giving us more clarification. It's good to hear that there is hope that the technology will be able to emerge and you'll be able to highlight the Section 3 compliance with each project, hopefully down the line. So with that, are there any other questions for our presenters? If not, we will thank them and ask that you please continue to keep us updated. Oh, I'm sorry, I see that Mr. Hall, our Bronx representative, has his hand up. Mr. Hall, if you could please ask your question quickly.
Yes, that was a very excellent point that Mr. Martinez brought out regarding Section 3. I just received some funding with regards to cameras, and I don't think that I hit your radar as of yet, based on what you just explained to Ms. Muldrow. But how can I be kept abreast as to what and when this funding will take place? I had a ceremony that took place Thursday, and I'm hoping that I can hit your tracker. But I'd like to know when will this take place, and who will keep me up front as to the vendor, and when the action is going to start as far as the placement of the cameras. Will you be able to tell me that?
Sure, Mr. Hall, that's a good question. I'll also follow up with you after this through email to understand a little bit more detail about what funding you're referring to. So for example, if it is a commitment from a city elected that they've just allocated, that would most likely come to NYCHA, for example, in the July budget, right? So only after July, the city would confirm to us, yes, you've been allocated this funding for this development, for this scope like cameras. And then we would immediately staff a team who would come out and talk to you about the project and say, okay, we have this funding. What are your priorities as a resident leader? What part of the property are you trying to cover? And then we structure the project together, involve you in the location and design of the cameras, and then move on through the rest of the project. So from the point where we actually get the funding, and it's confirmed to us through the city budget system, if it's city funding, that, hey, NYCHA, you've been allocated this money, then it'll flow into our systems, and then it'll flow onto the tracker. But I'll follow up with you offline to have a longer conversation about this to make sure that you're clear and we make sure that we're providing the updates that you want. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Mildred, if I can just add, this was very quick. We showed you a lot. If you do have other ideas, if you have other thoughts, feel free to reach out to us. We're very much in the development stage of this tool, and so we'll be able to incorporate your feedback as we go. Thank you again for your time.
Before you leave, I think that Mr. Martinez has a follow-up question. Manny, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Quick 30 seconds. You said that REIS is the best resource that you have, or that NYCHA has, but in all actuality, the responsibility of hiring and training belongs to the contractors who are actually on site at each development, as well as having a construction manager assigned to each contractor. So how is REIS the best resource instead of the contractors who are mandated to communicate, hire, and train in our community?
No, that's a great question. And so for residents who are looking for a specific opportunity or other sections of your workers at a specific site, you're right that you can engage directly with the construction managers and look for hiring opportunities. But that is not always the case. And some folks may be looking for general opportunities in any project at NYCHA in their borough or a different borough. And that's where I was highlighting that for general job postings, currently REIS coordinates that, but even for other training resources, information about qualifications and all that, that's the team that we have that, tries to work with residents to support on all of those type of things. And that's why I'm directing them there. But that's not to say that, as you're saying, when folks are on site and they're interested in a specific project they're aware of, there are a number of different folks who are ready to engage more directly on opportunities and things like that.
Thank you for that good question. So thank you again for joining us and keeping us abreast of the progress that this important project is making. We're really happy to see that the capital tracker is coming to fruition, and we look forward to further updates from you and your team. So with that, we will ask you to feel free to roll off, and we will continue with the rest of the agenda. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, now we'd like to turn, and it's hard to stay brief on this topic because it's so consuming and so important for the residents, the safety and security topic, which we've visited regularly in these CAC meetings. But we have progress on many of the important initiatives that we've been talking through since the inception of the CAC, particularly around FDNY, getting the keys and the key fobs, and the efforts by NYPD to stay closely coordinated with NYCHA. So I'd like to turn, please, to our representatives who represent safety and security interest. And I'll start first with Howard Gottesman from NYPD, because I know that you have time constraints, but if you will please give us some brief updates.
Good evening. Thank you, Asha. So I will do my best to stay within the time constraints. There are three issues I'd like to highlight. The first would be enforcing NYCHA rules and regulations. If you look at the highlights of the NYCHA rules and regulations, it's available online. Many points are not involved in public safety, but others are. And currently, unless it's a crime like selling drugs, the NYPD cannot enforce rules and regulations in public housing. The most we could do is prepare a form that we call a field report and send it over to management to address. But we feel that it's not enough, and we would like to start engaging enforcing the rules and regulations. This idea was presented to the Housing Authority not very long ago, so it's a relatively new idea. We at some point want to ask the resident leaders what their opinion on this subject is. We go to a lot of community meetings, and the number one complaint we get is quality of life, people not following the rules, loitering, smoking. There's a lot of confusion as to what's legal, what's illegal. But I'll give you a quick example. Smoking a tobacco cigarette or even a marijuana cigarette now is not illegal in public housing, inside the stairwells, inside the lobby, within 25 feet of the building, despite what the signs say. It's not a crime. It's against the rules. Owning certain types of dogs that people are frightened of has been a long time rule that unfortunately goes violated. 2 days ago in PSA 1, one of our officers was bit by a Rottweiler. That is a breed of dog that is inherently against the rules to own. And the rule was passed so long ago, it's impossible for any Rottweiler to be grandfathered in. They wouldn't be alive. It's a rule for close to 20 years now. So these are the types of quality of life complaints we get. And, long ago, the MTA had rules and regulations that were codified by the legislative bodies, both the city and state, to be enforceable by the MTA police, by the NYPD, and by certain other civilian MTA employees. We don't see why people who live in public housing should not be entitled to the same protection that people who use public transportation are entitled to. If you want to make comparisons, people who use public transportation use it very temporarily for an hour or two. People who live in public housing, they stay there much longer than an hour or two. They live there. That is their home. They have to walk past people hanging out in the lobby. They have to walk past the human waste that's on the floors and in the elevators. And there's literally nothing that the NYPD could do about it, absent that civilian report, which has no real bite to it. So the one thing holding us back, if we decide that we will, move forward with NYCHA's permission and with the tenant leadership, is the right to be heard, the 14th Amendment. We'd have to establish a court for people who were served or summoned to be heard. They have the right to address or to challenge those summonses. But again, this would not be an attempt. This would not be a money grab. We're not looking to raise funds. We're looking to improve the quality of life to the majority of the law-abiding, rule-following members of public housing, the employees as well. I see there's a hand up, so go ahead.
Please proceed. Regional Administrator Lee Godfrey Samuel. You're on mute.
It's probably good that I was on mute. I needed to start over. Thank you. Thank you, universe, for having me on mute. There's so much that I could say, but I would only ask that when you do have the meeting around this subject, please include HUD, please. And that's all I'm asking. In 2023 during Black History Month, and I'll end it there.
Thank you for that. And I think that points to the value of having some of these just roundtable discussions, even though, well, round Zoom discussions, so that we can reach across the table and include varying agencies that will have an interest in the subject. I know we have the DA's office on, we have city council on, so we have a lot of interested parties. I see Council Member Villas has her hand up. Please proceed.
Apologies. Hi, all. I'm so sorry. I am outside. I'm sorry, sir. I was not clear with what you were suggesting in terms of right to be heard. Can you clarify what you are suggesting here?
Yeah, sure. So NYCHA's rules and regulations, they've been around for quite a while. And my understanding was that there were notices that were handed out, whether it was by the housing authority or by housing police officers before the merger. And I believe the Second Circuit, the federal court, deemed that unconstitutional because there was no right to be heard. NYCHA, being the government, was issuing notices, and there has to be a right to be heard, right? You have the right to go and challenge that because it's a government body. So that would just be a hurdle if we were to ever consider doing this. That's something that NYCHA would have to create, because to my understanding, it doesn't exist. It exists at the transit level. There's something called a Transit Adjudication Bureau. If someone gets a summons on the subway system and they challenge it, that's where they would go. So public housing, and this is not just for residents, this is for visitors, people who walk into NYCHA buildings who don't belong there and violate the rules. As it stands now, a police officer could do nothing more than stand by and watch somebody, say, smoke a cigarette or crowd the lobby. We don't even have the authority to ask somebody to leave unless we know definitively that they don't live there. And how would we know that? There's no obligation for anyone to tell us whether or not they live there.
Wouldn't that be the case with any housing? Isn't that the case on the street? I don't understand. It sounds like there's an additional, creating another class of folks.
No, so
I just don't understand how the suggestion of this differs from what happens to any other New York City resident.
So
someone smoking in front of somebody's house.
This is inside of the building. It's a rule violation. We're not looking to criminalize it. We're looking to be able to enforce it. It's a civil.
And how do you enforce without necessarily criminalizing or providing additional penalties?
The same way you do it in the subway system. You hand someone a summons saying that they're in violation of a rule in the subway, and they have to either answer that summons, or if they choose not to answer it, obviously it would go unanswered. But there has to be some sort of quality of life enforcement, or the problems are not going to get fixed.
Yeah, I will say for the record, and this is not my meeting, I'm deeply concerned by what is being suggested here and the potential implication of creating an additional net to catch people. And I think it definitely merits some additional conversation.
That's what I'm proposing, is having that conversation. That conversation has not happened yet.
Okay, and I see resident leader Manny Martinez has a hand up as well.
Yes, so he brought up a point, and this was something that Ms. Modro and I were speaking of before in regards to how NYCHA may have lobbied for state legislation to get certain things codified within the city or state for enforcement. This would be a measure that would help resident quality of life to better enforce using what we have as a city at our disposal for certain factors, not all factors, but for certain factors that are egregious and do impact our community heavily. This would be something that NYCHA, we would suggest NYCHA use its power to leverage as well to codify some of these quality of life issues. And I thank you for presenting that, sir.
You're welcome. And Mr. Martinez, we don't know each other. I don't think we've ever met in person. What you're saying is something we hear all the time. That's the reason it is brought up. This was not something pulled out of the air. Residents want to have a certain quality in their homes. This is where folks live. They should not have to walk through these issues every single day. If someone could have a clean subway car, they should be able to have a clean hallway, a clean elevator, and so on. And that's the intention here, nothing more.
And I'm going to turn to resident leader, Mr. Gross from Brooklyn.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm agreeing with the captain. I think by our monthly meetings, a lot of residents have the same issues over, like the illegal dogs, people's getting injured, night employees getting injured, management employees. This is very common. A couple issues probably what all development is suffering. We have to have some mechanism to force quality of life. Number one, I think the management themselves should call in, should bring in the families and show them this is the rules and regulations. Management should start engaging with residents family if they violate. That's number one. Number two, NYCHA has in 250 Broadway in Atlantic Avenue, they have a hearing officer. They have the mechanism. If somebody was sent a letter, they're violating something, if they're not agreeing, I think NYCHA has a system right now for Section 8, for rent, for anything. And I think we can increase that same hearing officer to look in a couple other violations or tenants are not agreeing. I think that mechanism is in place. We just have to start enforcing it. Management would have to start enforcing and bring in residents with different quality of life, which brings us safety issues and for the residents.
A good point, Mr. Gross. Well, one thing is clear, there are lots of thoughts on this particular topic. So we hope that we'll stay in touch for when this more fulsome discussion will happen. And it's clear that it's going to need lots of stakeholders around the table. Council Member Avias, did your hand go back up? You're on mute.
So sorry. I was just going to say, obviously the quality of life issues are significant and must be addressed. I think what we should see, and I think Mr. Gross said it very clearly, is NYCHA needs to be the enforcement of the quality of life in its buildings and ensuring that people are maintaining, their agreements. So I think I'll just leave it there, but look forward to more of a conversation.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for that update. Did you have any other areas to update on?
Yeah, one other proposal. We're running out of time, so very quickly. My understanding is the Housing Authority has email addresses, I would imagine, of, if not nearly all, many of their tenants. We want to try to utilize messaging where we could get information out, whether it's to a particular development, a particular building, or all of NYCHA. We feel that the communication to the residents from the NYPD could be improved by utilizing this already built system that we call email, with just a couple of keystrokes. If we could send it out in batches, whether we're updating them on family days, on a natural disaster like Sandy, or some other event that is going on, a blackout. Phones are still working, smartphones at least should still be working. So right now we don't have a way of doing that in the police department. So we're gonna ask NYCHA if there's a proper way to do that. We're not trying to take anyone's personal information. We don't necessarily care, who the actual resident's name is attached to that email. We just, if they live in a particular development and we need to get information to people in that development, whether we're looking for somebody who's committing crimes or, like I said, there's a natural disaster.
Now, can the recommendation be a little bit less direct? Can NYPD get that information to the communications team at NYCHA to have it be disseminated?
Yes, yeah, so that's definitely one version that we put out there, where there would be either a point person or point people, either in boroughs or developments. You just don't want to make it too, too widely spread out, where if we had a message where we could get that forwarded to everybody nearly instantly. So we're going to be asking the Housing Authority and resident leaders. We don't want to do anything without resident input as to whether they think that that is a good idea. And then, of course, we would create an email, a reciprocal email if people had questions or concerns or a way to ask about the original email, that we could hear what they have to say or ask, and then we could respond directly without responding to the whole group. So that's the second thought, and I'll end with that.
Okay. And one of the things that we have done, because these safety and security issues are so important and require so much more conversation, is started to have a subcommittee on safety and security where we can talk through this. So if anyone's interested in joining this discussion, please let me know and we could help facilitate a meeting in between where we could deep dive some of these issues. Thank you so much for those updates. I will now turn to FDNY, please.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing tonight? Just some things we're going to touch on again. Door security, which we had discussed in our most recent safety and security meeting. We're going to, the FDNY is going to work with New York City Housing Authority to supply all New York City firefighters with their own individual elevator machine room keys. Those keys we're not supposed to duplicate, so we should receive them from New York City Housing. This should reduce the amount of damage that's done to doors when one individual key is not transferred. They're currently assigned positions to one position, and if that doesn't happen at the change of tours, eventually when we get a run for a stuck elevator, we have to force that door to get in. So that should reduce the amount of damage that we have to elevator machine room doors. The FDNY is currently in the process of, actually it's already been done. The video has already been taken. We're producing a training video for all members of the department regarding the usage of key fobs, and some of the layering that we can do to reduce forcing entry on responses. That video is also going to stress to every member of the department that training is unacceptable on any door at any time. It's just not something that it's just not a practice of ours that we want to see ever happen. And it will be addressed. If we're provided with the information, it will be addressed immediately. As far as we are moving on to another phase. This came out of the most recent safety and security meeting, where we are going to look to either issue all units with hardened keys for the doors that are specifically non-layered access. This should also drastically reduce the amount of times that we're required to force entry on a response. We did discuss possibly, there are alternatives for us gaining access also that will be discussed. This will be discussed in the video to all members, as far as instead of maybe forcing the lobby door, if it's possible to get in through a stairwell exit door quicker. If it's a more viable option, then it should be looked at. The only one of the things is, as far as the video, we do have and I went around, I tested it, the phone number where we can call and be buzzed in remotely. We can call the New York City Housing Authority. The only problem that we run into, it becomes a liability issue. So if somebody calls 911 and they have an emergency, for us, one of the instances I tried, the time was about 4 minutes and 38 seconds. 4 minutes and 38 seconds could be life and death. And I know as a fire officer now, I'm a chief officer now, but as a fire officer, I know I'm not standing there waiting 4 minutes and 38 seconds before someone's going to buzz me in the door if somebody called 911 for an emergency. Unfortunately, we don't know what that emergency is. Every emergency we treat like a fire. Like, that's why you always see us, we're in our gear. So that is something that we're going to remind all our units that option is there, because it may be the ability of a tandem where we can make that phone call, like I could make that phone call from the chief's car while they're trying to gain entry. And if it happens quickly, then boom, the door opens and they're in. So it's just one of those things. It's going to be a work in progress. When we do have the video completed, we will be able to share it. We're going to give it, we're going to review it with the safety, and hopefully it's done by the next safety and security meeting, and I can make a presentation. Everyone can review it. If there's any changes that need to be made, anything that wants to be added, we could do that as well. We did receive the go-ahead for training, a training door or a couple of training doors for the FDNY. We're just trying to work out some of the things such as funding, where we're going to get the funding to create one of these training doors. This is not these. So I can tell you from experience, these doors are very. They're basically, we only see them in magnetic doors for the most part in New York City housing. And with there being so many buildings throughout the city, I think our members are going to need to be trained in that forcible entry tactic. So that's just something that we'll work on, and securing the funding. But that's all I have right now.
Thank you so much.
We did issue a department order to all members that training is not going to be, that there is absolutely no training on any doors in a New York City housing facility. And again, any of that happens, we want to know about it right away, because the best way to fix it is for us to handle it, immediately. And if anybody has any questions for me or concerns, I would love to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that update. It's good to hear that there's been progress, and that the video is coming out with the emphatic message that training on the doors is absolutely not acceptable. And that the key fob circulation and the hardened keys are making their way to everyone. Mr. Gross, do you have a brief question?
Yes, I would like to ask NYCHA and the chief. In my development, we was very successful. We installed by every lobby door a fire key. The same key, what is working for the elevator, if the NY key is working outside the building. Fire department comes, right away they put in the key, they have access to the building. They don't have to wait even a minute. And I think it's doable. It's not a lot of money. That's can save lives. That's can help in case of a fire, anything. I think a FDNY key on every single NYCHA development building lobby door should be by the site next to the bell system, so the FDNY have access.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. And then before we close out on this issue, I just wanted to give the mic to Chief Secreto if you have anything to add. You're on mute. You're on mute.
You got me now?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Please proceed. We can hear you. Please
Okay.
proceed.
No, I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear from Chief Mike that we made progress, and I know, I don't know if he mentioned it. His bosses put out a memo dated, I think, December 30th, where they went into the damaging of the NYCHA doors, and that shouldn't happen, and that a report has to be done if in the case that it is done, and that's big. That's big, and moving forward, we'll find a way to so that they have doors that they can practice on, and that doesn't have to be real live doors in NYCHA. That's big, and Mike, I thank you for your efforts on that. Inspector Gottesman, he took a little hit on what he was explaining or attempting to explain, but I will say, and I see Samantha Rogers on the call, she had a survey with her roundtable members. It's a while back now, but one of the things in the survey was 100% of the people in the RAD-PAC developments felt safe in their developments. And I think the number, and I might be off a little bit, but 65% of the NYCHA residents, could have been 75%, do not feel safe in their developments. So my question was, why do the people in the Rad Pack developments feel safe? And the answer was that the lease violation notices were served in the event of a broken door, or I guess a dog pooping in the lobby or something. That resident was served with a lease violation notice. And I don't think that's effective in nature. And you know what Inspector Gottesman was saying, there needs to be more lease enforcement of the rules. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I lived in housing for 17 years, and there were rules back then. You couldn't have a big Rottweiler. You couldn't have any dog back then, for that matter. There's a lot of different rules that you know, NYCHA is not enforcing. I would like to see it enforced more. I know he took some criticism by some of the people on the call, but it's not the worst thing in the world if people have to follow the rules. Now, I'm not saying they need to be locked up, or you know, or what the issue should be. And frankly, if someone said they were given a summons for having their dog poop, their Rottweiler poop in the lobby or something, and they were given a summons, the word would get around. You don't have to give out 15 summonses, but you might have to give out one, and the word would get around that, hey, you know, the cops are looking at this stuff again. Because, you know, just saying. The other thing is the doors. I went out, and I know the comptroller wrote a report about doors in NYCHA, and I've been doing some visits around different development, and the doors are broke. It's terrible. Last week, I was with Manny Martinez out in South Jamaica. You know, 3/4 of the doors are not working. So I kind of, and I probably shouldn't have did this, but I volunteered with my bosses to have more of an active role in troubleshooting these doors and expediting the repair. And so that's on the table right now. I've offered that. Kind of crazy of me, but I did it anyway. We met with the police department last week. This will be my last thing, Asha. We met with the police department last week about some of these apartments. There was actually a murder in an apartment in the Bronx, Morrisania. And this apartment had been on our radar. There were 14 incidents there last year, and so far this year, two so far this year, one being a murder. There should be a way, and we're talking to PD about it, of expediting with these cases for legal action to get these residents out of here, undesirables or whatever, that make life miserable for their neighbors. So we met last week with the police department, and we're actively working on that to speed up the process, maybe put some priority on some of the apartments. This one is worse than the other 20, and to get some of these undesirables out. I shouldn't call them undesirables. That's not a good word. But, you know, when you have a murder in an apartment, you choose the word that we need to use to get them out. They shouldn't be there. And that's it. Oh, the homeless initiative. We're still doing the homeless initiative once a week. It's at like 6 o'clock at night, and we're going throughout the city, different developments. That's it, Asha. I won't take up any more of your time.
Thank you for those updates. It's good to hear that all of those efforts continue. It's very important because safety and security, we hear from residents, is really the #1 issue, and everyone deserves to be safe in their homes. So we'll keep working on that. We'll keep working diligently with all of you. Next, I will turn to Regional Administrator Eli Capri Samuel. Do you have any updates from HUD, please? Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First, I wanted to say that I was so glad to hear the presentation about the capital repair, well, the capital database. It's been a long time coming, and so that really did warm my heart. I think you all know that. The second thing I wanted to mention is it is so good to hear about the doors at NYCHA and the responsibility from FDNY. That's been a huge issue and a huge problem. So I'm glad to hear that that improvement and follow up. And that's the importance of this call in these meetings, And so it's so good to have been a member of this group from the very beginning, and then just to be able to witness all of the improvements that have been made from the first meeting that we had. And so I appreciate that. And to Secreto, I am so happy that you are at NYCHA. And I was very excited when, what we weren't excited when you retired from PD, we loved you there. But when we heard that you were moving over to NYCHA, it was, we were excited about that. And just in quick response to what was stated, everything that you mentioned, Secreto, is what we want to hear about safety and security in NYCHA. I want to hear you talking about that. I want to hear you and your team having those internal conversations, working outside with NYPD or community-based organizations or whoever it is that's working towards the public safety, just the safety of our residents. And so I wanted to just put a fine point on that part of it. You have so much experience in this field, and from a child straight out of Brownsville, born and raised in NYCHA, we all have just something to say at the table. So I go back to wanting to be a part of that conversation, but I also stand by just being happy that you are at NYCHA, Secreto, and that you are championing these issues. And so I feel comfortable in knowing that, but I want to make sure that we keep it internally. That was a point I wanted to make. So with HUD, when it comes to the agency ensuring the safety and health and safety of our residents, that is the most important thing to us at HUD. And so a big part of making sure that the residents that live in all of our properties, be it public housing, our HUD 202s, our Section 8 buildings, the inspection process is what we look to make sure that our families are living in safe and healthy conditions. And so last week, our team that is responsible for the inspection process across all of the HUD portfolios, the team is called REACT. That's our Real Estate Assessment Center team. They were in New York providing an informational session and a workshop on our new inspection process that's being rolled out called Inspire. In the past, we have had separate inspection standards for the different portfolios in HUD assisted housing. So if you lived in public housing, there was one standard. If you lived in a Section 8, project-based Section 8 building, that was one standard. If you lived in a 202, if you lived in a private building that has Section 8 units, that was a different standard. And so now we are making the inspection process uniform across the board. And so last week when the REACT team was in New York, we had management companies there and NYCHA staff was there, but I was happy to see resident association presidents in attendance as well. And so I just wanted to mention that is happening, that rollout is happening, and Inspire stands for the national standard for the physical inspection of real estate. And it speaks directly to changes to our fire safety requirements. We are now going to implement the National Fire Protection Association 72 standard, but it just allows us to have a consistency across the board. Is a more stringent health and safety requirements for smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, fire doors, electrical systems, and infestation. And it also, and this is the key part, Inspire would provide an opportunity for tenants to provide formal feedback about their unit's condition that could be used to prioritize inspections and address urgent concerns. And so this is a more robust opportunity for the tenants to be involved in the process and report their feedback to us. And so I just wanted to mention that on this call because again, this is a big deal for the agency. It standardized our inspection system and process. And there were some tenant leaders there last week during the informational session. And I know that the team has been reaching out and I think they're doing a full informational session with all of the resident leaders if they haven't done so already. But I'll stop there, but that's my latest report. And Thank you so much. And y'all know where I'm at, 26 Federal Plaza. Come see me.
Thank you so much for that update and for joining us this evening and for being the brains, if you will, behind the original suggestion for the capital tracker. Like you said, we're so glad to see it come to fruition because elected officials, other sources come up with this funding for these important projects. We really want to be able to see where they are and where the dollars are going and the progress. And thank you for the update on the standardization for the PAWS inspections. That too is critical. So with that, I will keep moving with the agenda. I know that Avias was on, and if she joins us, we'll let her jump back in. She had to jump off, but hopefully she will be able to rejoin. And I will turn now to our NYCHA representatives for varying updates. We'll start with Marnoush, please.
Hi, everyone. I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to be quick. But just a couple of things. I know last time we talked about the community centers project. So I can share that the project management team under the COO's office has undertaken that project. They're currently scoping, planning what the new intake process would look like. But it does require a major IT undertaking. It is a technologically complex project because a lot of things you have to consider include understanding what problem codes would be relevant for the centers. And also they're looking at, who would be responsible for what types of repairs, and then how to create a prioritization system. So they're working on the stakeholder engagement plan, the project plan, and finally, they're also working on considering a unique phone number, a new unique phone number for the centers to call for repairs. So there is active scoping on that project. I'm sure I'll have more updates on that in the next and future meetings. The other thing I want to talk about is January 31st, we launched the Coaching and Mentoring Leadership Academy. It's a 16-week pilot that will run through May, where we have 26, I believe, supervisory staff members mentoring 26 other staff members through one-on-one sessions, in-person trainings, virtual trainings in areas such as communications, customer service, crisis management. And the purpose is really to support and guide and to assist with enhancing job performance and highlighting career paths and growth. So that's really exciting. And at the end of the program in June, there will be evaluation to see if there will be if it would make sense to do a second cohort. And finally, I myself have been working on amended action plans across the pillar areas, elevators, heat, mold, lead, pest and waste, with the monitor team. Don't have too many details to share on that just yet, but again, we're making progress, and I'll probably have more details to share about that in future meetings.
Excellent. Thank you for those updates. It's really glad to hear progress being made on those important initiatives that we've been discussing here in the CAC. So that is great, and we'll look to you to keep us posted, please. Samantha Rogers, updates, please.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll be really, really brief. We have two updates to share. First and foremost, the first update is about the partnership that we have entered, NYCHA and CVR Associates. CVR Associates is a HUD funded training, consultant firm who will be conducting training on the CFR 964 regulations and also NYCHA and CCOP's memorandum of agreement. And these trainings will take place from now until the end of the year with 63 trainings in total, about 6 per month. Beginning in March, we did do a pilot, and these trainings will contain NYCHA residents, so resident leaders, NYCHA staff, including executive level staff, central office staff, and also property management staff, all being trained in the same rooms at the same time on the 964 regulations and also CCOP and NYCHA's MOA, just so that everyone kind of has the same understanding and gets training in the same time. So we're really, really excited about that. We conducted some in Staten Island just this past week. The feedback so far has been really, really positive. And so we're looking forward to, more feedback about that, and we can continue to report on that progress and the feedback that we are getting from that training as these meetings continue. And then the second update is about our resident roundtable. It is still going strong. As you may be aware, there were some recommendations made from the roundtable last year. And so we are now in our second year of roundtable. And so a part of this year's roundtable discussion is kind of the follow-up on those recommendations and the follow-up from NYCHA based on the recommendations. And so far, we have heard back from NYCHA, the quality assurance sampling team. So one of the recommendations was about the quality of materials kind of used in certain repairs. And so quality assurance team came back to NYCHA and came back to the roundtable to explain vendor selection process, materials process, et cetera, and the changes thereof in that regard. And then we've also heard back on an outdoor seating plan from NYCHA. So one of the recommendations was maybe lack of seating or too much seating in NYCHA. So some developments may want seating, say a senior residence may want extra seating in their development, whereas another development may say we have too much or it invites, loitering or hanging out. And so NYCHA did an assessment of outdoor seating to find out how much seating there does exist across NYCHA, where there's a lack, where there's too much, and then we'll invite residents to the table, moving forward, maybe before seating is placed. And so that's where we are with roundtable. Next up, they will hear from health initiatives on, things that are coming up in health initiatives and certain things that were asked, especially in regard to mental health. And so hopefully we will have an update on that in the next meeting. The health initiatives department will be presenting to the roundtable tomorrow. And that's my update.
Thank you for that. It's really good to hear the hard work that the resident roundtable members are doing. But it's so important to hear that NYCHA is getting input directly from residents on what works, what doesn't work, what you need to see, because they really are the eyes and ears on the ground for what's effective. So we're glad to hear that that continues. I want to turn now to Estelle Stryker Santiago. Did you have any updates or anything that you wanted to share?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me back to your meeting. The only thing that I wanted to say is that I know that I did not get back to folks from an email wanting to talk about cameras and our office and sort of evidence, cameras as evidence. So I'm going to circle back to the folks that sent me that email. I have talked to some of the deputies of our trial division, and they're willing to jump on the call and kind of talk that through. Definitely, as I'm sure everybody wishes for, we'd love more cameras and love access to the cameras. But that's a topic for a separate meeting where we can kind of do a deeper dive. The only thing I would say, and this is mostly for Manhattan, and if folks are interested in this in other boroughs, I do want to share that we have our application for our high school summer internship program. It's a paid program here in the office. The application is up and running, and it'll be open until the 22nd of March. And we really would like to get more participants from NYCHA communities. And so anybody, you can reach out to me directly if you're interested in getting more information about it, because I don't want to take up more time. But we are very committed to getting more high school interns from NYCHA communities this summer for this paid internship program. Thank you. And I'm available if anybody wants to email me with other questions. I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you. And perhaps while we have resident engagement on, is there a way to share that with maybe Reese or job opportunities, or a way to push out or post or something about that job opportunity for high school students?
Yes, we can. We can add that to our newsletter. So
Okay.
if we get that information, we can definitely that out.
So who should I send it to? To you, Samantha, or?
You can, and I'll get it out. I'll make sure it's in the right hands. Yep.
Okay. Would you mind maybe messaging me your contact information?
Doing it now. Mhm.
Thanks.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Excellent. Okay, great. That's exciting. Mr. Martinez, did you have any updates? I know we discussed kind of throughout the meeting, but I wanted to hand you the mic just in case.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Modro. And so we are looking at a lot of the issues that are happening here. CAC is, I know that for sure. We're looking at issues such as procurement, such as capital. We are looking at Section 3 and trying to streamline that. Security issues, definitively. I want to thank Chief Secreto for coming out to all of the developments that he has been touring, especially here in South Jamaica houses. And also, you know, I hope that we can find these 90-degree handles for these building entrance doors. Remember, $1 invested in prevention saves $6 in repairs. And so I really think that we need to have our mind focused in prevention. Lastly, on the last issue that was being discussed about quality of life issues, that is a very concerning aspect that we have to endure, but also a very concerning aspect from the other side who is going to enforce, or who is proposing to enforce. We do need to have stronger conversations of expectations of what we want in our community. Now, the first thing that we have to remember is that the discussions that we have, the conversations that we have is going to lead us towards the community that we have. And so we need to have better conversations, both with NYCHA and the surrounding services that cater to our communities. Lastly, with the trespasser issues that we have. Now, I know I don't mean to sound harsh, right? And I know that people believe that public housing is public property in the sense that it's open property, like Central Park or the MTA. And I know that there has been reference of MTA with codifications of enforcement. We are not. These are residential homes, and we have restricted areas that are solely defined as not having a presence there if you don't belong there. And that is not being enforced in our communities. We have no enforcement in regards to that. We have people who will escort them out and then let them come right back in. And it exhausts our resident population because they continue to call 911 and then nothing happens. And so they'll stop, or they'll report it to NYCHA and there's no strategy in place. And so they'll stop. And so I keep hearing that the DA is not enforcing it across the 5 boroughs. The trespassing laws is 3rd-degree trespassing in public housing, restricted areas, and it's not being enforced. I really think that what we need to do is start enforcing our rights. The huge obstruction that we have as public housing residents is this administrative obstruction, where you put processes in front of enforcing our rights, like escorting them out 3 times in an area that automatically is declared restricted. We need we too need to have our 14th Amendment enforced. And so on that note, I do believe that we are on our way to a better community. And I'm truly grateful for all of these conversations and all of the improvements that we've made. And I truly look forward to strengthening our partnership with NYCHA and with the residents of the New York City Housing Authority. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And Mr. Gross, the mic is yours now.
I'm 100% agreeing with my colleague from Queens. Every TA president and all NYCHA residents will raise the same concern. I just want to give you a sample of my developer right now. We have cameras all over. We have a team, a security guard is a red development. Let me give you an example how they enforce quality of life. We was having some residents bringing up a motorcycle with gas in the elevator, was not allowed, and park it in the hallway. So our security team was taking a picture from the cameras or taking a picture, sending a note to the residents. This is a fact. This is your bike. You park it over there. It's illegal. Please stop. Please park your bike outside the development. Next time, if we catch you again, you on a risk to getting terminate your lease. You will have to come to the property manager. If the resident is getting a letter with evidence, a picture, nothing's happening to the residents. Nobody's getting convicted. Nothing is happening. But the residents themselves will know to behave a lot better. We was having an example. Let me give you an example. If I have 5 kids sitting, my kids sitting on the staircase, drinking beer and with loud music, and management is sending me a letter with a picture proving this is what's happening. This is what my kids is doing. First of all, every father, mother would try to talk to the kids. And if you see the proof, if you see it in a letter, 99%, the families will stop to do it. And the quality of life will be better for the entire building, the entire development. I'm strongly, and I think all the residents, all the TA leaders are thinking the same. We have to start enforcing the quality of life first by the local property management and really like illegal drug sale or like e-bikes, gas bikes, different like, putting in lives in dangers. We have, I think last year, NYCHA residents, I think 2 kids died from an e-bike explosion. We have lives. We can lost lives in the NYCHA development if people brings in e-bikes or gas motorcycles in the building, in an elevator, something happened. This is something what's have to be really, really expedited, working with the management and the law enforcement to address these issues. And
Very important.
A mechanism to do that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gross and Mr. Martinez, for your insight and input. We appreciate that. And you make a good point that perhaps in a subsequent meeting, we can hear from NYCHA. We know they are doing a lot of work on the quality of life issues and coordinating with NYPD and safety and security as it relates to those issues as well. So perhaps we can get an update in our next meeting. I did want to get ready to close us out, please, and to make some announcements. So upcoming meetings on Tuesday, March 14th is our Brooklyn community meeting. And on Tuesday, May 9th is our Manhattan community meeting. So please join us for that. That is when we will focus on hearing from the residents in those respective boroughs. All residents throughout the city are invited, but the Brooklyn and then the Manhattan residents will be our VIPs and get the mic first that evening. And we will have the monitor and the monitor teams on to address any questions and concerns that they have. Our next CAC meeting is in April. We're hoping, COVID permitting, that we will be able to meet in person. So please keep your eyes on your emails. We're going to be perhaps shifting the dates and looking for an in-person place to meet. So we look forward to seeing all of you in person in April. And we ask you to please join via Zoom if you'd like our community meetings that are coming up in March and May. Thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate all of you and your hard work and your, most important, your willingness to roll up your sleeves, reach across the Zoom table, interagency cooperation to really move these important issues forward. So thank you for that. I want to see if any of my colleagues on the monitor team have any other closing remarks, and if not, I will thank you all for joining us. So Chief Secreto, is your hand up?
Yes, yes, Asha. I would not be able to forgive myself if I didn't thank Ms. Samuel for those kind words that she said, and I hope not to disappoint her in my new role here at NYCHA.
Thank you. Well, we echo those words. So please keep up the work, and we see you rolling up your sleeves and saying, okay, I will personally get the keys out. I will personally make sure our teams are doing the homeless initiatives, et cetera. So thank you for your commitment. And we look forward to hearing further updates in our next meeting in April. Okay, so with no further ado, I will close this out. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.